Hi everybody, I'm Al Ruechel, and welcome to this portion of the PCS Journal, where we sit down and talk with folks within Pinellas County School District about what their jobs are and how they benefit your kids and things that you need to know about. Thank you so much for joining us. And Donna Sicilian joins us right now, Executive Director of Student Services, Pinellas County Schools, and a friend of many, many, many years. Good to see you, Donna.
Good to see you, Al.
All right, this is, we had this hurricane that went through, and I just know that I've covered hurricanes in this market for more than almost 30 years, an awful long time. And I have never seen the level of anxiety as high as it was among everybody. Our staff, people out on the street, people on the phone calls that were calling us and just literally calling us in tears because they didn't know what to do. So you are tasked with the responsibility of trying to help kids cope with it. I mean, that's tough.
It is tough, and you're right. We saw the same thing among our staff and among our students. The anxiety just leading up to with this storm, the fact that it was so massive and it was so, the course kept changing.
And we talked about it for 11 days.
Yes, I think that led to a lot of anxiety and then what people experienced. For a lot of us, this was the worst storm that we'd ever lived through. I mean, it could have been so much worse, but it was still... I always tell people you can find somebody that has it better and you can find somebody that has it worse, but you have to deal with kind of what you have in front of you to deal with. And so I think that our students are returning back to school with a lot of post-trauma kinds of symptoms and signs that we wanted to make sure that all of our staff and families were aware of, so that they kind of knew what was sort of a normal reaction to something like Irma and what might be something that you want to be concerned about and get additional help for both yourself and for your children.
Well, and then about the staff, because a lot of your staff members, many of them were working at the many shelters that were open in the school districts. And I keep thinking, they're working, while their house could be gone. And I live in an A zone, my wife and I do, and believe me, when we left that house Friday evening, we thought, this may be the last time we see this house, period.
Correct. Yes, I understand that. When I went to shelter duty, I had the same thought. And,
so you were working in the shelter too?
Yeah. I think that's one thing I'm not sure the public understands, was that the shelter managers, the food service, the custodial care, everyone that worked at the shelter were school staff, school employees. And so I think, definitely a shout out to all of those staff, the principals and the food service. They just fed, tens of thousands of people.
25,000 people.
Exactly.
And for some reason, it surprised me, because I always had thought, boy, when you go to shelter, make sure you take all the water and all the things that you need. But in fact, meals were provided.
Correct.
And that was something I did not know.
Right.
Now, was that just at school shelters, or was that other shelters as well? Do you know?
It was at school shelters. I don't know what community shelters did. I know I believe we had expected some community shelters to open that didn't open.
Yeah.
So I think primarily in Pinellas County, it was the school district that opened their doors and sent their staff in and provided all of that support. So we did last week, after the storm had passed, I sent a lot of resources around to those that worked in the shelter, to all our teachers, talking about, first of all, self-care, because if we were going to be ready this week to welcome our students back, we had to spend last week taking care of our homes, our families, and ourselves, so that we could be in a place, to be available for our kids and families. And then also ways that teachers could kind of incorporate in lesson planning, an opportunity for kids to talk about what they experienced, because that's very important. I think it's really important that we give adults and children a chance to talk about what they saw, what they heard, what they were scared of, the good things that happened, how they saw neighbors chipping in who came and helped them, positive experiences they may have had at a shelter or a relative's house if they did have to evacuate. But just really having that time to talk about what that experience was like. And just kind of normalizing some of the things you might see in yourself and in your children, like trouble sleeping, a change of appetite. We talked about making sure we're a little more tolerant with kids' behavior this week.
Right, yeah, because kids can act up when they go through very difficult
Exactly.
times.
Depending on the child, they can either really withdraw and be incredibly quiet and unresponsive, or they could become very agitated and be sort of picking at the kid next to them, a little more belligerent than maybe that child normally is.
Now, I have to bring this up because
Sure.
one of our staff members at Bay News 9, where I work, they said, yeah, we went to the shelter, but then 2 days later the kid said, can we go back there? Because kids have such a different perspective. First of all,
Yes.
they don't think that their house is going to be destroyed, and they don't even understand what it means if it would be destroyed. And second of all, things that might freak us out, like having all these other people around it, for some of the kids, they thought it was cool because they had people to play with the whole time. I mean, isn't that...
That, and what you just said was really point, because you said some of the kids. So you're going to have those extremes. You're going to have the
Yes.
kids like you're describing that are just sort of have that resiliency, and they're able to bounce back, and they have a different like worldview. They have a different personality. They're more phlegmatic, and they're able to have a positive experience in the midst. But if you have a child that already is sort of more melancholy, excuse me, a little more worrywart,
Yeah,
they
and
may.
things like, and again, another experience from our people, they said, well, it was tough because when we packed up, they couldn't decide which one of the toys they wanted to take because they couldn't visualize themselves never having those toys ever again.
Right, exactly.
Lastly, how long can this thing last in terms of the impact it can have on kids?
Well, you will see the kind of things we're talking about for a few weeks, and they should lessen over time.
Okay.
I would say if you have a child that's still having, disturbance of sleep, their eating isn't right, they're behaving different, they're either more withdrawn and they don't come out of their shell, or they remain agitated and anxious, then after about a month, you want to make sure that you seek some help for that student. Anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks of ongoing, or even quicker if you notice that instead of getting better, it's getting worse.
Right.
So I think some of these things are normal responses to a traumatic event, which is really what we had. Everybody's going to perceive trauma different, like you're saying.
Right.
But if you see yourself or your student, getting more depressed, more anxious, sleeping less, eating more over time rather than getting better, then I would say jump on it. We have an EAP for our employees. There are many, many mental health community
EAP,
agents.
Employee Assistance Program?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And
Yeah.
so our employees can reach out to the EAP where they can get free counseling for themselves and their family. In our community, those that aren't employees, even if you don't have insurance, we have community mental health centers throughout our community. Really calling 211 is the best way to access resources,
Right.
both for social emotional support and people that maybe are trying to get help with their homes being repaired, help with food, electricity. So 211 is connecting with county resources and with FEMA. And so really just picking up the phone and calling 211 is the best way in our community to access help.
But I am surprised that in these kind of events, you always find some people that are afraid to ask for help, or they are so overwhelmed by what they have to deal with that they don't ask for help, and that can be a real problem.
It can. And I would say at the very least, if you are experiencing that and you have a student in our school, to just reach out at the school, tell anyone at the school. They will connect you with the school counselor, social worker, psychologist, nurse, and they will be able to walk you through that process. Because you're right, sometimes just even picking up the phone and calling for help can be difficult. But that's when we need to watch out for each other and see what do our neighbors, our church members, our co-workers need. And now's the time to not just sit back and say it's not my business, but to really, step forward with appropriate boundaries and say, I'm noticing this and I want to help. Can I help you get some help?
Yeah, and this is a time when we really understand what the word community means.
Correct.
And it's a common experience that we all go through, and probably something we'll be talking about for years to come.
Yes.
As we try to remember that hurricane season lasts about 6 months. It comes every year at June. Sometimes they're worse than the other, and already just to keep things in perspective, folks, this has been the most active hurricane season that we have seen in years, many, many years. And Irma set so many records, a Category 5 storm for the longest time that we actually tracked a storm on the air. The first time a storm has literally cut through the center of the state, just up and down. We've had them crisscross and go all over the place, but right up the front, and and on and on and on. So you know, healing is something that takes a while to get by, and we can survive.
We
can survive.
We did.
All right, September is attendance awareness. It's ironic, attendance awareness month, and yet we had to take some time off from school. So tell me about the activities that are involved in that.
Well, we know that September being like kind of the very start of the school year, all of the research shows us that a student that starts to establish non-attendance patterns in September, it usually continues throughout the year. So in addition to awareness, it's really a time that we try to emphasize with families and with students and with the community how important it is that every student attend every day. And so we have a lot of different activities going on throughout the year, but in particular during the month of September. We have a local artist, Corey Thornton, who has been doing some attendance awareness pep rallies at some of our schools. He was recently at High Point Elementary.
And that's the video I want to show you right now.
Sure.
Is at High Point, yeah. So, you know, kids don't attend school for a number of various reasons. I mean, I'm going to relate back to my own history. My parents got divorced when I was 7, and I was a master at figuring out. I was in a small town, very, very small town. I missed so much school because I could fake being sick, and I don't know whether I was or not at the time. So, are parents always aware that kids may be, in some cases, not playing games, but going through something that's very traumatic for them, and the way they act it out is by not wanting to go to school?
Sure. I think parents know their kids really well, and so sometimes we have that sense that something like that's going on, but we tend to rationalize it in our head and talk ourselves out of it. So we may say, well, I'm not really sure if Al's sick or he's just avoiding, but I'd rather err on the side of letting him stay home than sending him to school when he's sick. But what happens is that you start to develop a pattern of avoidance, whether someone's avoiding school because of bullying or just being behind or just not liking school, not being challenged at school. There's a number of different reasons. And even if it's legitimate health concerns, any time away from instruction is time away from instruction.
Now, but now let me just play the other coin. The other coin is, I'm tired of seeing that little kid right next to my child with a runny nose and coughing and hacking, and then that balance of knowing, okay, the kid is contagious per se and shouldn't be in school.
Right.
So how do you balance that?
Well, we just recently obtained funding through the Board of County Commissions to have enough money to have a nurse in every school every day. So this is going to greatly help with this, because we will have an LPN in each school every single day. And once we have obtained that money and hired that staff, trained them and have them in place, that will help greatly, because you will have a medical person that can triage and say, you know, you need to go home. You know, you really are ill. So we do track, we call it a return to class rate. So when we have a kid that's sick and they are seen by someone, and right now at a lot of our schools it's just front office staff, because we don't have a nurse in every school every day.
But you will have
we
to.
will.
That's the good news.
And so currently, of course, not being a medical professional, a lot of times they just send the kid home because, again, they don't want to err. They err on the side of caution.
Well, that's good to know. So that's new information I didn't know about. So there's going to be a nurse in every school. Did they give you a starting date on that? Do you know when it's going to be?
Well, I think we're going to have a contract with the Department of Health. The money goes to the Department of Health, and the school district will contract. We already received some money from them. This will be additional funding. We spend over $3 million of district money on the nurses that we have currently.
Oh, wow.
And we do not receive any money from the state allocated specific for that purpose.
Okay.
But the money that we spend, along with our community partners of the Juvenile Welfare Board and the Department of Health. So the Department of Health, we hope to have that contract in place October 1st.
Okay.
There'll be a slight millage increase that the Board of County Commissioners, they do the final approval on September 26th.
Right, okay.
And then we will start
the bottom line is coming pretty
realize
soon.
that.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. Donna Sicilian, good to see you, Donna.
Good to see
you.
you,
do great work,
Al.
and I'm glad to see that mental health is a high priority, because when you have situations like Irma and other situations, it's good to know. All right, we're back with more of our program after we take a short break. Stay with us.